Hi, I'm Tamara, and this is TELUS Talks with Tamara Taggart. Hi, everyone. Today I am speaking with David A. Robertson. David is an Indigenous author and public speaker. He lives in Winnipeg, Manitoba, and is a member of the Norway House Cree Nation. He has published over 25 books. You have probably read him in magazines, newspapers, his books. I am a huge fan of his memoir called Blackwater, and super excited to chat with you today, David. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me. I've been looking forward to it.
So, I first heard your name after I interviewed Jesse Thistle, probably, I think it was last year. And I said to Jesse, who are you reading right now? And he said, I'm reading Blackwater by David A. Robertson, and I'm reading In My Own Moccasins by Helen Knott. And so now I just feel so good because now I finally get to have a conversation with you because I've talked to Helen, I've talked to Jesse, and now you, and I'm a big fan of your work. So it's really lovely to have you here. And I found you, I read your book, Blackwater, and it's such a beautiful memoir, and it's really about your father, your relationship with your father. So for anybody that hasn't read Blackwater yet, can you let us know, fill us in on how that book came about, like why it was important?
Well, I really started thinking about writing a book about my father and I after we went to his trapline. He asked me in 2017, and this is actually where the book starts out. We went for coffee together. We talked in all these different places. Usually, one of them was at a coffee shop, and he at the end of our coffee, he leaned forward and asked me if I'd take him to his trapline. He said one last time, which kind of struck a chord. And of course, I said yes. So we had to. That was in the winter-ish 2017, and so we waited till summer 2018, and we went up to Blackwater. And Blackwater is one of the two trap lines that he spent most of his time on as a kid. He lived there for the first 10 years of his life, and it was just some really incredible things happened when we were up there. By the time we went up there, my dad was starting to feel a little frail. He was, losing his balance. He was starting to use a cane and things like that. But when we got onto the water, it's like he got 10 years younger. It was just an incredible thing to witness. It's like the land was giving him life. It was incredible and really beautiful. And then we got onto the land, and then I remember when I stepped onto the land, I felt like I'd come home. Just this overwhelming sense of home. And then after that day we spent fishing and on the land, I left thinking that I needed to write about it. And because it felt like the journey that we went on together, that was where we were going. It felt like that was like our destination, and so I felt like because we had reached our destination, that I needed to document our journey. And I felt like there was things in our journey that I think other people could draw meaning out of. And so I talked to my agent, and I just said, I want to write, a nonfiction book about my dad and I. And so he carted it around, and HarperCollins wanted to publish it. And so it's really just a book that it's a book of journeys. It's a journey of my father and I going to his trapline. It's a journey of my dad's childhood heading into adulthood. It's a journey of my own childhood, and then the convergence of our lives, my dad and I, and our relationship together over the last 30 years, and then what led us to going home. And home is, Kiweo, is a Cree word that means he goes home, and that's kind of the concept of the book. Was like that. It's really a journey home. The book.
Mm-hmm. It really is. And I mean, the relationship with your father is, you were raised, you and your brothers were raised as non-Indigenous.
Well, yeah, I think that, yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, we definitely were raised. I mean, my dad always said that he raised us as just kids, as people, as humans. He didn't want to impose any, identity on us. And so we definitely, I mean, for me, I feel like I did grow up essentially non-Indigenous. 'Cause I didn't understand, who I was as a Cree kid. I had no idea. That's kind of part of the journey, was like learning about those things later on in life, and coming to oneself. That's another idea of home. It's like, the feeling of home, of feeling comfortable in your own skin, like being comfortable with who you are.
Mm-hmm. Because I mean, your mom and dad were trying to, I don't know if protect you is the right word, but they knew that it would be difficult for their kids to grow up as First Nations kids in Winnipeg.
Yeah, that totally. One of the last things my dad said to me, that we did a series of interviews together, and it became a podcast too. And one of the things he said was, I didn't want you to have to go through that. I didn't want you to have to go through racism. I didn't want you to have to go through, the way that people might think of you or treat you, if they knew that you were Indigenous, or that, because the climate around that time we were growing up in Winnipeg, it wasn't the most positive climate to be an Indigenous person. So he did want us to, I think he did somewhat wanted to protect us from what we may have experienced growing up, with that knowledge.
Yeah, I mean, it came from a place of love. It didn't come from a place of, from anything really negative for you guys. He loved, it was out of love. And I find that so interesting, because your journey to where you are today, I mean, how does that affect you as a father? You have 5 kids, and like, how did it, I'm trying to find that, that connection between your relationship with your father and now your role as a father. And sometimes we learn from our own parents' mistakes, if you will, right? And we don't want to repeat the things that they did, or we want to, be different parents than our parents were. How has your childhood affected how you father?
Well, I definitely, even though I came to understand the way my parents raised me, and listen, I was raised well, the focus of my parents was really to raise gentlemen, to raise good people. And I think my brothers and I are good people. But, I think that in looking back in hindsight, my childhood, and I had a good childhood, but I was missing, there was something I was missing. And I knew that. I knew there was something I was missing. And so I didn't want my kids to feel that sort of sense of displacement, sense of disconnect. And so my wife and I have worked hard to expose our children to their indigeneity, not to impose an idea of what it is for them, because it's a very personal thing. One of the things I always have said is that my idea of being Cree is different from anybody else's idea of being Cree. I've developed that on my own. I developed a sense of Cree identity, which is informed by my own experiences and my dad's life and his way of living and traditions. And I've kind of made that into my own sense of self. But I've given my kids, with my wife, the tools to develop that at a very early age. And so they're very aware of their indigeneity. They know that they're Cree and Métis. My wife's Métis. And they have a sense of culture from those two backgrounds. So much so that, earlier this year, when the unmarked graves were being discovered here in Canada, a school reached out to my youngest daughter, Lauren, and asked her to present to them. And, she went without really much help from me and presented to the class on, residential school history, but also on Cree ways of living, Cree language, traditions, and ran them through exercises. And that's something that I would never have been able to do. And, I think it's reflective of the time we're living in as well, because not a lot of kids would have been able to do that in the 80s, period. But but we've given them the tools, I think, to have a strong sense of self-confidence in their identity. They know who they are, and they're proud of who they are. And so they also know what's wrong too. Like they know what's wrong, racism is wrong. They know how to deal with someone who's treating them differently because they're Indigenous. They know how to deal with those things because they've been equipped with knowledge. And so we have taken a bit of a different approach to how we've raised our own children as to, how, but I think that's what parents kind of do as well. You kind of, like you said, you kind of learn from your own experiences and you're always growing, you're always kind of learning how to do things a little bit different, a little bit better. I'm sure I've done things a little bit worse, so it's just the experience of life.
Mm-hmm. It's hard though. I mean, it's parenting is hard. And obviously you don't find that out until you become a parent. And then you go, wow, this is hard. And, your kids your youngest is
6. Yeah, 6. Yeah.
And your oldest is in their teens, right?
Yes. Well, I have 3 teens. It makes me feel so old, but I have like a 13-year-old, a 16-year-old, and an 18-year-old. So, okay. Yeah. And then, Lauren's 11.
So you're in the thick of it. Mine are 11, 13, and 14. And it's hard. I feel like I'm living in a major hormone factory that I have no idea what's happening minute to minute. Like it can change.
Yeah.
And so your mom and dad split up when you were young. What was that like for you as a child?
Well, I mean, I missed my dad, more than anything, I think I just missed my dad. And I don't feel like I grew up without a father, because I saw him, I think, on weekends, and we spent time together on weekends. But I definitely missed that constant interaction with him. And because of that, I think that's part of the reason why I grew up without some of that knowledge, because, he wasn't around all the time. So it might have been different if he was around all the time and I saw him do, more things, just by virtue of living with us full time. But, it was really just like, for me, it was, because my dad's always been my hero. And so it was me just missing having my hero there, and so it was just a son missing his dad more than anything else. And I wasn't really able to articulate all the other different variables that I'm able to now in hindsight, looking back. Like I can look back as an adult and know what I missed, but as a kid, you just miss your dad,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So have your brothers read the book? Have Blackwater?
I don't know. I don't think so.
Right.
Yeah.
Because I would think it would be really difficult. It's a beautiful book and relatable, like you said, I think to everyone, because it's a father-son love story. I think.
Yeah. Actually, one of the reviews of it said like it's really a love story, like a father-son love story. Yeah, I think it's.
Oh, I didn't read that anywhere. Yeah. I didn't copy that. Yeah. I just but it is what it feels like to me. But I can see, because your father passed away, and didn't have a chance to read the book himself.
No.
So I would think that it would be hard for your family to read it, because it is such a beautiful love story.
It's hard for them. I think it would be hard for them. And again, we don't talk about it, so I don't know if they've read it or not. I don't think I would really ask them to unless they brought it up with me. So, but you're right. Like, I mean, and I think the other thing is, it's my view on our life. It's my view on him. It's my view and his view, on his life, his relationships, and my view on those things. So, we do in some ways, as much as it's nonfiction, we do kind of manufacture our own realities in some way, because, we don't remember everything. So, we remember things with a certain perspective that comes from our own kind of internal memories. And if that makes any sense. So my experience of my childhood and my dad's life from my perspective is totally different from what my brothers might be. And, they have different feelings about their relationship with him. And so I think it would be hard for them to read the book for a lot of reasons. And it's definitely I don't blame anybody for that. I can see how it'd be hard. It was hard for me to talk about it for a year, when it came out, and writing it, researching it, especially after my dad died. It was, it took a heavy emotional toll on me that I didn't really recognize until a couple months after the book came out, when I kind of crashed, and so, I understand, all that to say, I understand why my family probably hasn't read it yet.
So you've, in 2017 and this year, you won the Governor General's Award. So, and did your dad go with you in 2017?
Yeah, my dad and my mom. We went down together to Ottawa for all the events down there. It was a really beautiful 3 days together. And I mean, even more so now that I don't have him around anymore. I'm really glad that we spent that time together, for sure. I think he was. I know he was really proud of what the book had accomplished, and proud of me, and proud of Julie. Julie, Julie and my parents really hit it off, and they developed a nice little relationship too. And it was just a really, really nice time down there together.
Yeah, an incredible experience, just, in general, but to have both of your parents there is really special. So you use your voice online, on social media, especially on Twitter, I would say. I do enjoy your Twitter feed because you're outspoken. You are not afraid to call it like you see it. And especially in your own province, when you see something happening, you are very vocal about it. Were you always like that? Or is this something that, I think the older we get, the less we care about what other people think. So I know for me, that's where mine comes from. But what about you?
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, over time, I used to, I still do care what people think a little bit, but I care less than I did like 10 years ago. 10 years ago was like, tell me how much you love my book. Tell me, give me a good review. Give me, all those things. And now, what's changed for me over the course of time is that I feel like there's been a responsibility now that's kind of been placed on me to speak out, to be an advocate, to challenge people, to motivate people, to motivate children, and I feel like that's a part of what I do now. There was always the writing, but over time, over the last 10 years, as my platform has, grown a little bit, I feel like that's become a big part of my job. It's not just writing books. It's speaking out, when I feel like it's appropriate. I don't do it all the time, but, I think for me, it's a little strategic because there's things that I feel like my voice, I don't think it really is as important. But for very specific things, I think I feel like I'm kind of accountable to say something, and so I do, whether it's around the discovery of unmarked graves or, whatever it might be. I feel like it is something that, I guess it's like, if you can say something, if you can do something, then you ought to, And there's a quote of my dad's that he used to have in his notebook that was like, it was something like, I am only one, but I am one. And I can't do everything, but I can do something. And what I can do, I ought to do. I guess that's how I would summarize it.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, I read, I see you in the paper. Oh, I think I read an article you wrote in, I think it was Fashion Magazine.
Yeah, on Ashley Callingbull. Yeah.
Yeah,
amazing.
The cover story.
Yeah.
And it's just incredible because you are a beautiful writer and you're smart. So it's not like you're writing stuff that is, to me, it's basic human common sense for the greater good. for everyone. And the things that you do, right, are very educational for people who maybe don't, understand, or they've never heard of, whatever it may be that you're pointing out. So I mean, I love that you do that. I think that it's, your books are so great, but when I just find personally, when I see you speak out, it always gives me a view that is more meaningful, because I don't know what's happening in Manitoba. I'm in British Columbia. We have our own stuff going on here, and a lot of it is similar, but I think that for a lot of Canadians, we don't know what's happening in every other province. How would you compare, Winnipeg today compared to the Winnipeg you grew up in?
I mean, some of it's the same. Some of it hasn't changed much. I feel like there are areas of the city and that it's not the best place to be Indigenous. It's just speaking from an Indigenous perspective on Indigenous issues. It's still a rather violent place for Indigenous people to be, in particular Indigenous women and girls. It's still, there's still a lot of racism and discrimination here towards the Indigenous community. I think it's gotten better over the course of time. I think the mayor here has done a pretty good job. Brian Bowman in his work. I think he's also recognized when he's made mistakes. I think that humility is important. He's always open to hear criticism, and I think that I can respectfully take leadership to task when I feel like they need to hear when they've done something wrong or so. But I think that the city has a lot of work left to do. But I think change takes time, and so my dad used to say that for as long as we've experienced trauma, we need to heal from that trauma. So, if Winnipeg's been not a great place at times to live as an Indigenous person, then it's going to take a while to get to the point where we feel, that it's a safer place to be for us. But I think that's a big focus for me too. Is my own city, my home, and the province in which I live. I think that we need people to hold people accountable, and I definitely think that's one of the jobs that I'm happy to do. Whether it's through writing or public speaking, I think that it's important, because without that, I don't think we can really ever really change. So, I'm just one voice of many, but I think everyone should figure out what part they can play.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, so I want to ask you about mental health and being vulnerable. But before we do that, we always we want to thank our guests for being here, and so we'd like to give back. And we ask our guests to choose a registered Canadian charity. You chose the Indian Residential School Survivors Society, and we will be giving them $500 in your name.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I mean I'm very familiar with the organization, but could you talk about maybe why you chose them? There's so many to choose from, I know, but...
Well, they're an organization, I think, that just does a lot of good work in supporting survivors and families and communities. Especially this year, it's important. I've tried to donate whatever I can this year to them and encourage others to. There was a young girl here who was selling lemonade during... one of the days that we were having a march at the ledge for when the first unmarked graves were discovered, and she raised a lot of money selling lemonade. This I think she was 11-year-old girl, and so I suggested that she donate some of that money to the Indian Residential School Survivor Society, and she donated half of it to that organization. And when that first month, my publisher and I, for When We Were Alone, we donated almost all of the proceeds from that book to the society. We were able to donate almost $10,000. So it's a good organization that and a nonprofit. It needs that kind of support to do the work that they do, and we need programming to support survivors, healing programming, to support survivors, because we're still going through trauma as Indigenous people and as intergenerational survivors. And so organizations like that are important because the government isn't doing much in that area. And so we need places like that. And we need them to be able to operate and reach as many people as they can. And the more we fund them, the more work that they'll be able to do.
Awesome. Well, thank you for choosing them. So let's talk about mental health a bit, because you know, in your book, in your memoir, I should say, I think your dad always used to say that our story isn't a story of trauma. We have trauma in our history, in our lives, in our family, but really our story is a story of resiliency and a story of cultural reconnection and a story of love. But you've been very open about your struggles with mental health, and I think that it's a story that many people can connect to. Was it important for you to be open about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it falls under the section, the kind of heading of what you should be talking about when you have a platform, I've dealt with mental health struggles for, a long time, but acutely for about 12 years. My first launch for Seven Generations back in 2009, and that's the thing, like, you never know when someone's struggling. I almost didn't go to the launch. I was right outside the bookstore at McNally Robinson, and I was like ready to go home because I didn't think I could stand up. My legs were so weak, and I felt my heart was racing, and I was going through a nervous breakdown at the time, and so I kept that inside for a while. I kept that inside to myself and just within my family for a long time. And then when I started to figure out ways in which I could function, first function, and then I think live more healthy, with anxiety and with depression, I started to feel as though I should share what I'm going through, because I was in group therapy. And, it's such a lonely feeling to go through anxiety and to have depression. You don't feel like anybody can really understand what you're going through. And then you meet people who do, and you're like, oh, people do understand what I'm going through. And actually, it helps to know that. And so I learned that in group therapy. And so I decided that I needed to share what I was going through because, whatever amount of people, were listening to what I had to say. And so I felt like if I expanded, my advocacy, or whatever you want to call it, beyond just Indigenous issues to mental health issues, I feel like I could make some sort of a difference. I could help some people. And so I started to speak about it publicly, and I started to write about it. My first young adult trilogy, The Reckoner, it's really a mental health trilogy. It's really about mental health and anxiety and depression. And panic disorder. And what I found is that, when I do a lot of classroom visits, whenever I spoke about the books at any classroom across Canada, almost every single classroom, a kid would come up to me afterwards and say, I'm going through that, and I've never been able to talk about it before. And even just reading a character who's feeling something similar to what you're feeling, it makes you feel seen, and I think it's cathartic. I've become more and more open about mental health because I feel like it's helpful to other people, and I think it's also helpful for me, to talk about it as well. I think it's healing for me as well. So it's just something that I feel like people need to see, someone who understands what they're going through, and also who is going through what they're going through, so that they know they're not alone. And that was helpful for me. I think it's helpful for others as well, just to know. I mean, sometimes just knowing you're not alone is actually a really important thing.
Mm-hmm. Well, we talk so much about the stigma, and we need to talk about this more and that, but it is still there that it's people don't want to talk about it. They don't want to share because they don't want to be judged. They don't want to be thought of differently. They don't want to be thought that they're weak, mm-hmm. or they're embarrassed by it. So, I mean, you are a successful well-spoken, handsome man who walks into a classroom, and you look like you appear, as many people do that are around us, that you have it all together. You have everything going on. So I think that when we show that vulnerable side, especially to children, right, they need to see that we can all be vulnerable. That's where the change happens.
Yeah, I was at a speaking event for WordFest in Calgary a couple of years ago before the pandemic, and it was actually just coincidentally a panel about mental health, and I started to have a panic attack right just before the event, and not because of the event, because I actually really love public speaking. It calms me, which is, I guess, a little weird, but I got up to the front of the stage with some really cool people. Vivek, who is a writer, who's an amazing writer. I think it's Vivek, and Alicia Elliott, and so we were talking about mental health, and I said to the crowd, "I'm having a panic attack right now," and you wouldn't know it from looking at me, and I just want you to know that you'd never know when someone's struggling, and I'm struggling right now. And I think just even that, I think, was helpful for maybe somebody in the audience to know that I went up there, I was wearing like nice clothes, and I looked all put together. My hair was combed, and I put on deodorant and all that stuff, and then, but I was having a panic attack, and you would never have known unless you were me that I was having one, and I think people needed to know that. So.
Yeah, the transparency of it all is how we grow, I think. Okay, let's just talk as we finish things off. You are okay. So now tell me about the Disney TV deal that's happening, because this is huge. Like, we're seeing Indigenous storytelling really, like, it's not just books or newspaper. It's like it's branching out into so many different mediums now, and we're seeing it all over, and it's really exciting. But you have some very exciting news. Well,
it's kind of this like surreal time I'm living in right now, where it's a lot of things have happened over. It's almost like enough to give me more anxiety, which it probably has, ironically, but it's so the Burying Grounds came out last year, and it's done a lot better than we thought it would do. Both me and the publisher, and one of the things that has happened because of that success is that production companies really noticed, and so we had a few production companies approach us to adapt the Burying Grounds and the whole Misawa saga into a film or a television series. And so we settled on one that we felt we were very confident with, and it ended up connecting to ABC Signature, which was a subsidiary of Disney, and so now it's just like the thing is like it could never get made, which is part of the business too. Like, I know that it could be 10 years from now and then it would never get done, which is fine. But it's likely because of who's involved, and we're really excited about that. But it's a waiting game right now. But you're right. Like, it is this incredible renaissance, I think, in Indigenous art right now. Indigenous artists are having this renaissance where in music and writing and art and in all these different areas where people are, in literature, people are reading and buying our stories, and not because they feel sorry for us and they feel like that we need the business. People don't operate that way. They read books because they want to read books, and so we're pretty good at it, and so, if you look at the bestseller list from week to week, like more than half of them usually are Indigenous by Indigenous writers. And it's a really exciting time. And I think publishers are recognizing it too. So they're publishing more and more Indigenous writers. I work for one publisher as a referral guy, and I kind of scout out other writers that we want to give opportunities to. And so that's also something that I'm really happy to be a part of, because there's younger writers, emerging writers coming up that, all they need is a chance to, a platform to share their stories. And so it's a really exciting time. And I think this is a byproduct of of what's happening right now in North America and in Canada with Indigenous writers, Indigenous artists. And I'm just happy to be one of a growing number of, really successful writers who are, are finding an audience, and teaching people some really important things with the books that they're writing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree 100%. It's been so great talking to you. We could talk forever. I know that. But I really appreciate your time in chatting with me. And yeah, like I said, I've been looking forward to this for a long time. You are at darobertson.ca. That's your website. Mm-hmm. Your Instagram is David Robertson Writer. And on Twitter, you are Dave Alex Roberts. You know what? Right. If you just go to any social media and type in David A. Robertson, you will find him. I guarantee it. And of course, you're at every bookstore, you're online, you are everywhere. I really appreciate your time. Thank you so much, David.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It was so nice to talk to you.
Thanks for listening to another episode of TELUS Talks with Tamara Taggart. Be sure to subscribe so you can join us every Tuesday for another conversation. You can also check out our website, telus.com/podcast, and subscribe to our YouTube channel at TELUS Talks.